psychologist and special educator working with DeepRanjani Foundation, welcoming all of you on behalf of the entire team of DeepRanjani to our webinar segment. This segment is dedicated to celebrating the World Mental Health Day 2023, and we have dedicated our webinars to mental health and well-being. Today, we are privileged to have with us Dr. Shekhar Seshadri, who will be engaging us in an experiential sharing on the mental health rights of LGBTQAI plus community on the eve of World Mental Health Day. Sir, we welcome you. Sir's contribution to mental health and well-being is beyond an explanation, but we take the opportunity and feel honored to put forward a brief introduction about Dr. Seshadri. Dr. Shekhar Seshadri is a child psychiatrist with over 35 years of experience in the field of child mental health. As former senior professor in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, NIMHANS, his work has extended beyond the clinical population to children, child care institutes and services providing across the country as well as Southeast Asia. Some of his special areas of interest are childhood trauma, gender and sexuality issues, and life skill education. Also an artist and musician, he uses a number of creative methodologies in child mental health interventions, including theatre and developmental approaches. Dr. Seshadri is based in Bangalore, India, and is currently advisor to SAMVAD, which stands for Support, Advocacy, and Mental Health Interventions for Children in Vulnerable Circumstances and Distress, a national initiative and integrated resource for child protection, mental health, and psychosocial care. Supported by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India. We are hopeful that today's journey would be able to provide new perspectives and aspects of lived experiences of the community. Before we take the event ahead, a brief introduction about our organization, the DeepRanjani Foundation, which was established in January 2022, with its focus on vocational training, employment generation, consultancy, and OPD services. Now, let me hand over to Priyanka, our psychologist at the DeepRanjani Foundation, to continue with the event. And once again, a very warm welcome to all of us present over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Varna ma'am, and thank you so much, sir. It's an honor to have you here with us. I mean, the work that you have done for us over the years and the progress that you have made, and I think since this year's Mental Health Day's theme is that mental health is a universal right, it would have been incomplete without touching upon the lives of the marginals. So here we are, sir, on the discussion, and the stage is all yours. Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhu, and thank you very much, Priya. I was actually hoping, just as India has won 100 medals in the Asiad, that the number of viewers on this would also hit 100, but we are almost there. We are kind of hovering between 90, 91, 93, and hopefully other people should join. Now, Madhu, Priya, just remind me, we have 90 minutes, right, till 4:30?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that. So what I wish to share with you is actually divided into two parts. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes, as Priya pointed out, into looking at some lived experiences and stories, and then spend another 20 minutes in a conversation with those of you who are on the event today. Then I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes in working with you on some conceptual frameworks, and then end up again with a discussion to take the matter forward. As you're all aware, friends, many years ago, homosexuality was considered a disease. If you look at mental health, psychiatry, and the classificatory systems that existed in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. It was when DSM-3 came that they kind of changed the whole idea into what they called as ego-dystonic homosexuality. And many of us who work in the area of gender and sexuality advocacy and rights wondered whether there is something known as ego-dystonic heterosexuality. Why should ego-dystonicity be only attributed to the LGBTQAI plus population? Much progress has, of course, been made. I have had the honor and privilege of being the first mental health professional to file an affidavit in the Supreme Court for repealing IPC section 377. And if you recall the history, the Delhi High Court actually read it down, and then the Supreme Court later went back to the old rules, and then now we've come to a stage where the whole decriminalization where 377 is concerned, and one would believe that progress has been made. Or has it? Has progress really been made? And that's a question that I really throw at you and leave you to sort of agitate, cogitate, and ruminate about. Stories. LGBTQIA plus. L. Female born, cisgender. So you have your genetic sex, your anatomic sex, your gender identity, your sexual identity, sexual roles, and all of that. How has civil society actually conceptualized or responded to the sexuality, affirmative sexuality of female-born individuals, whether they are cisgender or not? If you look at the pernicious triangulation of patriarchy, heterosexism and homophobia, transphobia on the one hand, and you look at another pernicious triangulation of patriarchy, misogyny, and gynophobia, how does civil society respond to the assertion of sexuality by a female born as opposed to the assertion of sexuality by someone who's born male, whatever the orientation may be? So look at the story of a female born who is either cisgender or with a trans identity. And then look at how the story emerges. And it's a story that may play out even where gay men are concerned, bisexual individuals, people with trans identities, queer identities, intersex, asexual, and all the other non-binary forms, which is a term that is most in currency these days, the whole concept of non-binary. And I'm going to refer to some of these as we look at the emerging stories that. What is the confusion that a child who has gender dysphoria or gender identity faces? And when does a child have a sense of his or her gender? And if a child has a trans identity or a lesbian or a gay identity, at which point of time does gender dysphoria actually emerge? That now, if you look at the life histories of children who experience gender dysphoria, and gender identity issues. Not all of them necessarily have a trans identity. A certain percentage conform to what their birth, gender, and sex is. A certain percentage have a trans identity, but a fairly significant majority actually have a lesbian or a gay identity. This is what literature all over the world shows that. But what is the predicament of this child? So look at this 7-year-old or 10-year-old or 12-year-old. An 8-year-old boy who is gay, and therefore the whole notion of effeminacy. And if you look at the cultures that play out within the gay movement in men, if you look at Karnataka, for example, we have the Koti culture and the Panthi culture. The Kotis are softer, effeminate, passive, and the Panthis more masculine, more, but they're gay. And often the Panthis tell the Koti, why are you behaving in this effeminate manner? That no. Now this is a problematic construct, and I actually remember Suhasini, Maniratnam's wife, being quoted in Pinky Virani's book Bitter Chocolate when she says, "I would like my son to have the right amount of masculinity, the right amount of femininity, and the right amount of humanity." So this notion of how children are socialized. So if you look at rights and you look at the opportunities that are provided during the socialization process, where gender is in an amorphous form and is slowly crystallizing into a more robust and a clearer identity, what is the kind of confusion that an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old boy who's gay actually, and then do the math and look at all the stories, all the bullying that takes place, and the stuff that happens at home, and how his inclinations towards aesthetics and fine arts and no breach of confidentiality. My childhood friend Ashok Jethanandani edits Trikon, one of the biggest ethnic gay support magazines in the Bay Area in California. And when I look at his childhood when we were there together, I mean, he liked knitting. He was really good at knitting. He liked cooking and so on. And how rights violations takes place at that stage itself by the stereotypical way that gender socialization takes place. I'm not even talking about the kind of exclusion, marginalization, and violence that takes place later. So I'm not even coming to, for example, to police violence and the transgender community on the streets at traffic lights. But I will come to that in a bit, because those are also lived experiences that. And then look at the being outed, coming out process. Look at internalized homophobia. So if you look at the pernicious triangulation I spoke about, patriarchy, heterosexism, and homophobia, how a gay or a lesbian individual, because of internalized homophobia, suffers an enormous amount of confusion and distress, which remains unattended for significant periods of their developmental phase. And if they do come out, and then what the response of the family is, because the family itself is a victim of its socialization. Then look at all the exclusion that takes place in their lives. And you then look at a gay boy or man who has what we perceive and describe as effeminacy, or a lesbian woman with the way she is, and a trans individual and the kind of marginalized lives that they lead. Now, the predicament of the male born trans individual who may undergo surgical procedures in not aseptic and in reasonably good institutions, with the attendant danger of infections and botched surgeries and all of that, to their being ostracized by the families and then moving to the margins of civil society and then being relegated, which is a common sight, to the traffic lights, the bylanes and the back alleys, the hammams, or to people in more privileged circumstances who have the resources to go to Thailand and get themselves operated by Dr. Chatawat, paying the thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that he charged. Good surgeon, that's not my point. So exclusion and its mental health implications starts with all the bullying stuff that occurs for gay and lesbian children, adolescents at that age, and then the exclusion that occurs in the workspace and in social spaces. Now, look at the advantage sometimes that a gay man who does not carry himself with manifest effeminacy enjoys in social spaces. So you carry on because you look like a man. Unlike, let's say, a lesbian woman, even more unlike a transgendered individual, and the way that people distance themselves and the stigma that takes place. So there are levels of exclusion in people's lived experiences that really define where the centrality of rights around all the mental health implications that it has of what these people experience and endure actually go through. And in all this story, there is complex, serious conflict going on in the family. So if it's a girl or a woman who is asserting her sexual orientation as a lesbian or gender orientation as a trans individual, families to say, I mean, are you nuts? And that's where in the past, all this business in the 60s and 70s of all your conversion therapies and therefore the impacting on the rights of people, that being dragged to, and how professionals themselves fell into the trap, that those things have changed. But my question again is, have they? Maybe conversion and all that is not done to the extent that it was in the 60s and the 70s, perhaps even in the 80s and 90s. But has the predicament and the status really changed in terms of a rights-based approach to the kind of individuals that we wish to assist in this context? Then look at the personal relationships. A gay man, a lesbian woman, a bisexual individual, a transgender, and a transgendered person is not just male to female, female to male. There are hundreds of identities within that if you really look at the non-binary, kind of. If you look at a traditional heterosexual milieu and context, how does a guy and a gal actually get together? How do those relations, how does love happen? How does romance happen? How do relationships and friendships get established? And what kind of spaces, therefore, do gay men, lesbian women, bisexual individuals, transgendered individuals, and I also want to remind you, my friends, that as you would notice that I constantly use the term transgendered person, individuals, community, because transgender is an adjective, it's not a noun. No, so it's not those transgenders, it's not a noun, it's an adjective. And this is what many of my friends in the community in what was believed was the gender of the child. But then when adolescent hits and hormones go crazy, and that's why you do a chromosomal analysis and you find that this 16-year-old is actually not the gender in which he or she was reared. And some of these kids actually have medical interventions, including surgery that needs to be done, because some of those interventions are life-saving. So what about the rights of this 6-day-old child or 3-month-old child? Is that child's consent really taken for life-changing surgeries that you do for? So look at that story. And then you may be in a relationship. Are gay relationships, lesbian relationships constructed on the same parameters that we traditionally recognize in a patriarchal structure? Or are constructs of patriarchy problematically internalized even in these relationships? Hence the theme of violence even in lesbian relationships, the dominant partner and not an egalitarian. So you see how this, and then the mental health and the substance use kind of thing gets into the picture because of a whole life series of rights violations that take place, all of which put together constitute minority stress, being constantly reminded that you're the minority. And if you look at rights as an ideology, and if you look at the whole minority and major community status, and then you look at this equation and relationship, you can see how across the LGBTQIA plus lives and their lived experience, this entire thing, kind of plays out. That having said this, I want to draw your attention to this aspect. The National Human Rights Commission recently held a conference on mental health and human rights in Vigyan Bhavan in Delhi. And they have brought out a book, 2023, called Mental Health Concern for All, in the context of the Mental Health Care Act of 2017. Shruti Chakravarti and Pooja Nair have written a chapter on LGBTQIA plus and mental health, which covers all the dimensions that I have spoken about. And so this, my friends, is the kind of story that plays out in this life cycle from the time that a child is gender dysphoric to having a gender identity disorder. The confusion, the coming out, being outed, internalized homophobia, exclusion, bullying, conflict within the family, struggles with relationship breakdowns, struggling. Is monogamy a patriarchal and heterosexist construct? Does it hold in lesbian and gay and other relationships in our community? Then what happens in social and workspaces, in malls, in cinema halls and workspaces? Now, people speak about workspaces being inclusive and common toilets and Pride Week and Pride marches and all of that. And one would believe that progress has taken place in terms of conscientizing social and workspaces to the predicament of rights violation of the LGBT population. But it doesn't seem to have reduced the mental health issues, including problems related to self-harm and substance use, and the whole issue of minority stress that constitutes the story of many people who actually articulate the kind of relationship experiences and social experiences that they have endured. तो ये है कहानी इन लोगों की. Now, what we will do is, I wanted to present these stories. So, if you imagine the 6-year-old child, the 12-year-old gay boy, the 14-year-old lesbian girl, the transgendered individual with all the ridicule, stigmatization, and ostracism that she faces or he faces, as the case may be, and where bisexual individuals are actually positioned. Is there indeed a pecking order, even within the LGBT community, that places some kind of marginalization of some individuals over others? Are gay men in some ways more privileged of the spaces that they can enjoy and of social acceptance compared to? All these are rights-based issues. So there are gross rights-based issues leading to mental health morbidity, such as the kind of violence that the trans community often faces in the dwellings that they occupy, and the people around, and those who rent out their spaces, and the local policemen, and the law communities, the law-keeping communities. And so this is the life that really plays out, all of which has significant mental health impact. And therefore, we are really concerned about the extent of depression and the extent of self-harm that constitutes. In fact, I recently curated a program on survivor loss, and it's a beautiful book called Left Behind, written by a person who lost her husband, a doctor, to suicide. And there is a chapter in the book, again, so it's no breach of confidence because the book is there in public domain, about Revati, a trans activist who speaks about another trans person, Famila's suicide, and and who to her was, and for a person to feel a sense of helplessness, nowhere to go, who to approach, and our mainstream help providing systems, caregiving systems, are they really as inclusive as we would like them to be? Does the LGBT community have access to queer, affirmative, trained individuals who will actually provide them with the kind of caring, empathic, respectful, and helpful responses that is part of their right? So I'm going to stop now, and I'd like to spend about 15 or 20 minutes in conversation. Then I'm going to go to part 2 of my presentation, where we will go take a deeper dive into conceptual frameworks of the point that I'm trying to make in the context of the theme of World Mental Health Day on October 10th this year, which is mental health, and that it is everyone's right. I see that we have crossed the century and there are 114 people. The questions can either be put on chat, and I'll happy to see them. And if there is a hands raise option or an unmuting option, we can take that also, and it'll be useful to engage in a discussion that way. So please do use the chat option. And Madhu or Priya, is there a hands raise or a Q&A option here, or some way to unmute?
Yes, sir. The option. Yes, they can raise their hands. We'll unmute them, and they can ask their questions.
Excellent. You'll curate that?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So
Yes.
Srishti has a question.
Srishti, go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. It's a pleasure to attend your session. So, so I have a few questions. The first one is that could you please recommend some resources for queer affirmative training or education for budding mental health practitioners or students like me? So that is my first question.
Let
And
me let me take it one by one, Srishti, so that so
okay, sure,
you stay there.
sure,
So
sure, sure.
there's an enormous amount of work coming out on queer affirmative counseling methodologies, particularly from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, particularly from KP, who works in the faculty in the department at TIS. So if you, I'd be happy to send to not in the session today, but I'll be happy to send it to my hosts so that they can send it on to put you in touch with some of these people. That I would also like to point out two reading sources. One is a book edited by Arvind Narayan, my friend lawyer from Alternative Law Forum, and Gautam Bhan, published by Yoda Press. It's called Because I Have a Voice. Because I Have a Voice. And the second, again, is a book published by Yoda Press and Sage. Sage and Yoda joined together. And it's edited again by Arvind Narayan and Vinay Chandran, my friend from Swabhava, which is a gay rights and a counseling agency. And the book is called Nothing to Fix, the Medicalization of Homosexuality. These are excellent reading materials. So Swabhava in Bangalore also runs a telephone helpline called Sahaya, where we have fixed the kind of gay affirmative counseling work that can be done. I, of course, would like to share with you that there are a number of other wonderful organizations, including, I mean, since the majority of you are from Kolkata, I'm sure you've heard of SAFO and other such groups who work in the area of advocacy and activism, but also work in the therapy and counseling space. But a lot of work has come from Tata Institute of Social Sciences on gay affirmative therapies, particularly from Dr. KP. And I'd be happy to give those contacts a little later, but these are two books that would be really. And thank you, Pompi Banerjee. The Mariwala Health Initiative, as you know, is one of the most generous initiatives that look at supporting mental health initiatives. Recently, they had actually supported one of our initiatives on social determinants of mental health, and they also helped us curate an art exhibition by children on public mental health, which was done in. So as Pompi Banerjee says, resource book, which is published, they also run a course on queer affirmative counseling practice. So thank you very much for that information, Pompi. Srishti, your second question, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for that elaborate and very helpful answer. My second question is that you mentioned that even in lesbian relationships, there is a dynamic of violence wherein there's a more dominant partner and there's a more submissive partner. So I just want a bit more clarity as to, is it always the case that all such dynamics stem from internalized patriarchy, or are there also, individual differences that come into play that might not have something to do with patriarchy?
It's very interesting that from a time where people in family work use the term marital therapy, they change the term to couples therapy. They don't use the term marital therapy anymore. It's called couples therapy. And I'm actually quite surprised by the amount of literature that exists on the extent of violence in lesbian relationships. And, I've often wondered why that should be so. Excuse me. And to me, if you were to ask me between whether this dynamic of a relationship conflict, the extent to which it stems out of internalization of patriarchal constructs as opposed to individual factors. I do not have any data on this, but my own sense, based on my experiences, it seems to be based more on the internalization of this patriarchal structure of how intimate partner relationships are actually constructed. Take two friends, Srishti, two girls or two boys, or a girl and a boy, and you're not in a romantic relationship, you're not in an intimate partner relationship, and you have a difference of opinion that, and how that conflict is resolved and the extent to which verbal, emotional, or physical violence constitutes the way that that conflict is resolved, versus the extent to which emotional, verbal, emotional, and physical violence actually constitutes the way in which the conflict resolution takes place in lesbian relationships, particularly. I haven't heard of this so much in gay relationships, but more so in lesbian relationships for some reason. So it seems to me that it comes more out of this internalization of how relationships ought to work. The so-called structure of the family, the idea of the bread earner and the homemaker, and so that seems to play out more rather than the notion of a relationship, whether heterosexual or not, to be completely egalitarian. Even in a heterosexual, setup, for a husband to say, "Ye mera kaam nahi hai," toilet mein harpic lagana mera kaam nahi hai. Excuse me, where is it written that thinking of buying harpic and putting in the toilet is actually the lady of the house's job? Where is it written? There is no basis to this. These are all patriarchal constructs that. Having said that, would there be individual factors? I believe there are. So it's not that it's entirely devoid of, but I would give more valence to this whole idea of how relationships are actually lived out, based on thousands and thousands of years of our idea of intimate partner relationship and its larger superstructure of the family. Right? I see that Minmoy has her hands raised, and I also have another question on chat from Monica. Let me take the question from Monica, and then I'll ask Minmoy. Monica, happy to meet you again. And thank you for recalling that you attended some of my sessions during the pandemic. The question is, if a person is from the LGBT community, how to deal with loneliness, as mostly they face issues like a broken relationship. I have been looking at this issue from the perspective of the spaces that are available for. Now, are there spaces in the work spot for socialization? I'm not talking about intimate partner. I'm not talking about an intimate, and I'm going to come to that in my second part of my presentation when I speak of intimacy as a construct itself, and where does the rights and mental health issue play itself out. There are many organizations I know, and certainly organizations in Bangalore, for example. There's a space called Good As You, or Gay. And it's essentially a space where people come and meet and talk and chat and hang out. So if you have a conflictual, intimate relationship or a broken relationship with your partner, you also experience exclusion in the workspace and other social spaces, and your family is cut off from you and you don't have an extended supportive family. How do we create support groups and support spaces that so support groups become an increasingly important construct and a context to seriously consider in not just in big cities, but also in some of the smaller cities. And indeed, I often think about the predicament of the LGBT individual in rural areas. What would their lives be like, and how do they live out their lives, and उनकी विडंबना क्या है, उनके मन में व्यथा और पीड़ा क्या है, कैसे जीते हैं वो अपनी जिंदगी, और कैसे समझाते हैं लोगों को, and how does all this play out that. And there indeed is an area for a lot of work, qualitative work on the subjectivity of the lived experience of people who are not urban centric. That so many organizations, other than providing advocacy, activism, and therapy and counseling care, also provide basically social activism, looking at legal predicament that they get into, police trouble and so on, is just to provide a space to congregate so that you have social relatedness, you have an extended community to connect to, even if you're cut off from your family of origin and your current relationship did not work out. So, Monica, that's the kind of thing that I think we need to seriously consider as a movement, because that would really address the very important issue of human rights. They have the right to socialization. When we look at mental health as a more overarching construct, I'm not talking about depression, anxiety, suicidality, and substance use, but I'm talking about this socialization, just the freedom to be able to move in social spaces. And let's take Mrinmoy next, followed by Swati Garg, and then I will go into my concluding part and then take some more questions. Mrinmoy?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. Sir, I had a question. It's related to an incident regarding a school. Recently, in a reputed girls' school in Kolkata, a new rule was added that students are not supposed to keep short hair. Like, they are supposed to have at least shoulder length hair. The idea behind this rule was that students are getting confused about their orientation, which may or may not be true. I am not clear about it, but in such cases, if students are in some way confused about their orientation because they don't get to engage with opposite sex students or people, then how can we help them?
You would be surprised to know, I'm taking the issue that you've raised to its larger context. You'll be surprised to know that there is a college in Bangalore where there is a separate staircase for girls and boys. And we try to tell those people that, excuse me, life is co-educational. What happens when they go out of the college gate and so this kind of stereotyping, that the whole issue of the physical visage of how a person should look, the whole issue of effeminacy, that men, for example, should not wear earrings and or grow their hair, but what about the sadhu babas, and what about the rock musicians, and these are all constructs of and so my point is, patriarchy is not a fight between men and women. And I some of my gurus from whom I've learned in the feminist area, that patriarchy is a fight between men and women who are for patriarchy and men and women who are against patriarchy. because women perpetuate patriarchy sometimes as much as you could, of course, argue that they are victims of the kind of gendered socialization that takes place. So the internalization is very pernicious and over centuries and generations. But the point is that these kind of sessions in the school, so part of what I'm doing right now, and I'm actually putting on chat the links to the current work that I'm doing, which is a national initiative on child protection and mental health. And do have a look at the links in the YouTube channel. We have a lot of stuff there about how we work with schools and educational institutions on the whole issue of gender and sexuality, to understand what a more gender inclusive and what non-binary is, and how to look at a person, a boy or a girl, essentially as a human being, as a person. The gender part of it, what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, what is masculinity? Does masculinity have to be consistent with the theme of aggression and conquest? Or is it a natural endowment that occurs through, can masculinity not be consistent with the theme of tenderness? And just a very interesting example, Michael Kaufman and Michael Kimmel, who work a lot on masculinity, and one of them, Michael Kaufman's YouTube, if you go to Michael Kaufman, Kuffman, he has a YouTube, it's a TED talk actually, and then he said he was in this group of women, and one white woman got up and said, oppression is an experience that is common to all women. So a black woman put up her hands and said, when you look at the mirror in the morning, what do you see? And the white woman said, I see a woman. And the black woman said, you see, that's the problem. When I see myself in the mirror, I see a black woman, because privilege is invisible to those who have it. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. And then later in the TED talk, he says that there was this group, men were also there, and they were talking about reverse gender discrimination, that deserving men were having jobs taken away from them in the name of gender equity and so on. And the thesis of this person who was talking was, a black woman took my job. A black woman took my job. And Michael says, I have a problem with one word in that statement, a black woman took my job. The word is my. How did you think and believe it was your job to be? Why not a black woman took the job, or a black woman took a job? Why my job? So masculinity, he says, is not about the theme of absolute power. While men enjoy power over women, men enjoy power over other men based on issues like class and caste. So it's more about the experience of entitlement to power. And that's what we have to question. So to go back to your question, then we really need to look at the way that we work with education system administrators and teachers to really raise these issues and question it, so that we don't get into stereotypical ways of how boys and girls ought to be as far as their physical visage is concerned. Swati, let's take a last question from you, and then I'll go to the last bit. I also see that there are a couple of other posts in the chat, and I will refer to them also as we go along. Swati?
Good afternoon, sir. It was lovely seeing you after such a long time.
Thank you.
During the pandemic, we were with you. So my questions is that, I was working with Child Welfare Committee, and there were two cases which used to say that they were lesbians. Keeping their respect intact, one of the girl, like, she was turning 18. So I counseled her that, now the government is looking for a boy for you, since you've been staying since childhood with us. So, she agreed. She says, okay, I'm looking forward to meet this guy. And then she got further married also. And now, it's been 5 years. They have 2 children. She's very happily settled with the child. I mean, with the boy. And she's like, probably, ma'am, that was the only option which was available. That's why I took it, being a lesbian. Now, the other one was the same, that she was a lesbian. And while I was counseling her, I was just asking her that, whether this is a choice or this is something where, you thought that, okay, this is something which is only available and you took it. And, then she came back to me after a year and she said that, ma'am, boys are nasty, so it's better to be with girls. But she wasn't sure about whether she's a lesbian or not. Now, in such cases, keeping their respect intact, but how to, figure out whether they're actually, because they themselves did not know whether, that is how they were lesbians or not. So this is where, I get completely confused.
Well, all these are embedded in processes, Dr. Garg, that often in one sitting or one interaction, it's not possible to know a person. It reminds me of a song that one of my friends wrote, how much do I know you? How much you care to show? As much as I care to see, there's still a lot more to know, because there's your private self and your public mask and your unconscious as well. Is it too much I ask? And so many gay men and lesbian women have succumbed to the pressures of the family and got into marriages, produced children, perhaps quelled their rightful orientation, perhaps led private double lives. We know how all this plays out. Sometimes it goes on for a lifetime. Sometimes it comes to be known. There is turmoil in the family, and all this drama plays out there. But by and large, with a young individual, there are ways in which, through a series of sessions, when we look at their attraction patterns, their fantasies, there's a whole way that, and this is particularly so with young people who come with an expression of trans identity, because that predicament is even greater for parents of 12-year-old and 13-year-olds. So we have methodologies by which we do this systematic assessment, particularly where trans identity is concerned. So I just wanted to say that all this is embedded in process. And it's kind of related to a question when Priyanka says, do we ask heterosexuals and cisgender people if they're sure about their orientation? And it's interesting that Priyanka speaks about invisibility or invisibilization, because in Shruti Chakravarti and Pooja Nair's chapter in the National Human Rights Commission book on mental health and human rights, invisibilization is one of the major things that they speak about, which is a rights issue and a mental health issue. And Devjani speaking about the e-certificate. This is the other question, which of course is Samsung is not this person's name, is the device from which the question has come. In mental health care, there's stigma and lack of cultural sensitivity and both the conscious and unconscious reluctance to address sexuality. And as we are aware that the majority of LGBTQ plus people say that they or a friend or a family member have been threatened or harassed or sexually or non-sexually and experienced violence because of their identity. So as a therapist, how can we address this issue and create safe spaces for them? So I basically wanted to share something with you, on this count. If you'll just give me a moment to. Here I am. So this, friends, is really what I wanted to share with you as a final, and it kind of addresses the question that a therapist needs to keep in mind, that if you look at the construct of intimacy itself, whatever one's orientation may be, and you look at okay, Kasturi, I realize that you're the person, Kasturi Thakur. Thank you very much. Yeah. And which is any human being who assists any other human being who is hurt or injured is human intimacy. In a cultural program or in a movie, you have a bit of a share about how brilliant Kaushiki Chakravarti's concert was. If only you have listened to Shashwati Mondal singing her tappa, people don't listen to Shashwati Mondal as much as they listen to Kaushiki. They're both those brilliant individuals, but aesthetic intimacy. Relational intimacy is something that we share in the workspace, with people. We share cabins together, we do lunch together. That not all people that we are in a relational intimacy with in a work or an education institution do we have affection towards. Do you have affection towards your boss, towards your colleagues? Perhaps yes, perhaps not. And then there is, of course, romantic intimacy, and then there is sexual intimacy. That now, when you put these various levels of intimacy against the whole construct of sexuality, my submission to you, friends, is that the conventional understanding of sexuality as enumerated here doesn't even cover 10% of human sexual consciousness and experience. And look at what happens here, cross-gender. LGBTQAI plus is out. Marital. What happens before marriage, beyond marriage, around marriage, outside marriage? Procreative. What about people who do not have children, people who cannot have children, people who do not wish to have children? And what about sex for pleasure? Consensual. What about marital rape? What about child sexual abuse? Mutual. Two people are in a consenting relationship, but it's not mutually satisfying too. Relational. Problematic where incestuous abuse is concerned. Complex where the relationship of a male client with a sex worker is concerned. Genital. What about non-genital aspects of sexuality, such as love, affection, commitment, aesthetics, communication? What about affirmative female sexuality? Whether you're cisgender, lesbian, or you're trans, female born, or you're male born, but you are a trans person and therefore you're actually a female. And what about affirmative female sexuality? So if you look at how violence plays itself out, that it's in these contexts of our understanding that so wherever we work, in the spaces that we work, in order to mainstream the fact that there is an enormous amount of sexuality, and not all of it affirmative, because I'm not saying that incest abuse is valid. That's not my point. Not at all. In fact, it is very problem. But what I'm saying is there is an obverse image here, which one needs to keep in mind to construct the entire premise of sexuality. But if you put this against each human being's career of sexuality, each of us, my friends, has a very unique career of our own initiation into our sexualities. Was it through abuse? Was it through experiment? Was it in the context of an affirmative relationship? What were the developmental trajectories? What happened at age 10? What had happened at 14? What at 17, 18, 21, 26? The variation of experience between people and within one person's lifetime, that not every aspect of core aspects of the sexual experience are necessarily the same. So there is a variety in that experience itself. And what is the extent to which that variety is affirmative or non-affirmative, what is the extent to which their experience is hostile, and to which the experience is violent. I once asked a superintendent of a childcare institution that you're going on your rounds and you open a door and you find two boys engaging in physical and sexual intimacy. What would your response be? He was a very open and honest superintendent. He said, "दो झापड़ लगाऊंगा और बोलूंगा कि ऐसा किया तो देखना क्या होगा." I said, okay, supposing there were two adults engaging, whether two men or two women or a man and a woman, whatever it may be, and you open the door and you see them engaging in physical and sexual intimacy, what would your response be? He said, I'll say, oops, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to. Really sorry. I said, why can't you give the same respect to those two boys? This is not to say if you open the door to say, हाँ भाई लगे रहो, बहुत अच्छा, शाबाश. That's not what I'm saying. But to say, oh, I'm sorry, didn't want to disturb you, but a little later, can you please come and meet me? I'd like to speak to you and understand and explain certain things so that you don't frighten them and you don't terrorize them, that you come from a position of punishment and of negative judgment, that so that you basically get them to understand what a happy, healthy, safe, and responsible sexuality is. So a rights-based approach to children's and adolescent sexuality, a rights-based approach to the sexuality of people with disability, a rights-based approach to the sexuality of the LGBTQAI plus communities is what we're talking about. And if you put this against public discourse, and this is the question that was raised in chat, the whole violence, trauma, and victimhood, as against what sexuality should actually be from a rights perspective for each individual. It should be celebratory. It is your right. And in the right relationship, in the right context, it is actually a joyous and a celebratory experience. And that's where the kind of education, training, and practice discourse that I'm talking about becomes important, so that all the positions that we come to are experience and practice based and not based on personal opinion. And as a child practitioner and as an advocate for children, I basically also come from a position where I feel we need to re-examine adult response to children's sexuality and take a more rights-based approach to children's sexuality. So this is the framework that I wanted to basically present to you to cap the point that I was making. And let me quickly take, in the meantime, those who want to raise more issues or ask questions, please use the hands raise option, and Priyanka or Madhuparna will curate it. In the meantime, I will take two of the questions which are posted on chat. One of which is from Pompey Banerjee. Should determining someone's sexual orientation be in the purview of a psychologist, social worker, or any government agency? Feminism is argued for self-determination, and the queer community has resisted the legal demand of providing transgender certificates issued by medical bodies. Pompey, it's a complex question. I completely agree on the right to self-determination. And that's the position that many of us have taken. If you look at the Nalsar position on the transgender community and so on, it is just that if you look at the WPATH guidelines, it used to be called the Harry Benjamin guidelines. WPATH stands for the World Professional Association of Trans Health. It's, I think, the 8th or the 9th edition, where they speak about real time for people who have trans identities. So, you may be male born or female born, but you do real time, and then you have reversible treatments, which is hormone replacement, and then you have irreversible treatments, which is reassignment surgery. The problem about certification is essentially the reassignment surgery, because that's it's non-reversible, and for that certification, would be required, and this is the framework largely that one needs to keep in mind. Arkita Talukdar's question is request is to provide insight on the aspect of gender fluidity and sexual fluidity throughout an individual's lifespan, who identify themselves as heterosexuals. That so this pansexual or gender fluid term is a term that is not comprehensively understood. In fact, Akshay Khanna, a lawyer who's written a chapter in Because I Have a Voice, Gautam Bhan and Arvind Narayan's book, published by Yoda Press, makes some very interesting statements. And he speaks about the fact that he likes makeup, he likes wearing bangles, and but he has a penis, and so am I bound by the confines of my anatomy, or are there other aspects of my visage and my sensibility and my aesthetics and stuff that I like to do that really define who I am as a human being? And therefore, the term gender fluid, in fact, if you look at the Satla Kotis in Karnataka, these are homosexual men, and they're the Koti being passive recipient, and Satla means that they cross-dress, but they don't have gender dysphoria. They don't want to have sex reassignment. They have no problems about their gender identity. So, but they may cross-dress, and in fact, for many of these people, a very core aspect of and whatever you may call them in terms of conventional transvestism and all those labels and definitions, but for many of these people who are gender fluid, the whole act of cross-dressing is so central to their identity. You take that away, you're taking away from their identity. And, I've had this very strange experience because I was the president of a human rights organization dealing with sexuality minorities. And the office was located in a residential locality with flats. And the flat owner knew me and all that. And he would tell me in Kannada, "Yen sir, पैंट हाकोंड बढ़ता रहे, सीरे हाकोंड होता रहे, क्या सर जी, पैंट पहन के आते हैं, साड़ी पहन के जाते हैं, क्या हो रहा है?" And I try to explain to them, कि boss, this is their identity, and I must tell you another heartbreaking story. I was working with this 16-year-old male born with trans identity who wanted to transform to what he was, which was a woman, and go into acting and be successful and famous and known. And of course, my work said, look, there are several aspects here. There is who you were born at and your conflict and your struggles with the family and all of that. There is this change that you want to do, and the social, the legal, the medical stuff. And then there's your ambition to be an actress, a famous and a well-known and a much-loved actress. That now, why don't we work on getting you into acting training and acting assignments, so that you hone your skills there. Apne hunar ko aap wahan tez banaye, and let's work with that. Let's also assist you in working with the family to see, to equip them with the comfort to, accept who you are, and not just accept, but to support. And then look at all the medical procedures. So we kind of. So he brought me this portfolio of photographs that he had taken. My mistake. She had taken of, makeup and different dresses. Friends, they were tacky as hell. They were tacky. This was her idea of what femininity was. It was heartbreaking, yeah. And, when she left, I burst into tears because the sheer poignancy was so heartbreaking. The pictures were horrible because they were tacky. But this was his idea of, so this is what one needs to keep in mind where, we really look at the whole issue of self, determinism and so on. Priyanka, you have a hand raised. You go ahead, and then I will deal with a couple of other questions on chat.
Sure, sir. So, first of all, thank you for presenting it as a systemic issue and not that the mental health issue of somebody who's from the margins is only their responsibility, which is never true. So I would like you to shed a bit of light on this focus on coming out. Like, I got a lot of questions in the registration form that it's important to help them come out. It's important to, let them be, able and empowered to be coming out. Why so much focus on coming out? If somebody chooses to stay the way they are, low key, and still manage to live their authentic lives, why is there such uttering, shuddering need for them to come out? Can you please skip a light on that?
Let me contextualize this for you. I always find it useful to step back a little and expand our frame of reference. One way the story can play out is, let's say, let there not be this brouhaha about coming out, but you're outed. And then what is the story and the drama that plays out? The second is for an individual that I need to assert my identity and I wish to come out because I don't want to keep this as this is not anything private or secret. I need to be accepted the way I am as an individual. Choice is another story. Put these two together to the point that you're making, and therefore, for an individual who, and many young people, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 30-year-olds have come to me asking me for assistance to work with their families, and I have done so. And the families, of course, are looking at me in shock and stupefaction, saying, "What the hell is wrong with you, doctor? I thought that you'd be more understanding of our predicament," because they are victims of their own socialization. Now, how to help them come out of their patriarchy, heterosexist, homophobic, socialization too. So the idea is, I do not understand. I do not accept. I will not accept. Stop this immediately. I will get you fixed. I do not understand, but I respect what you're saying, that I'm very distressed. I wish this was not the case, but whatever. I do not understand. I'm confused and upset, but your happiness and well-being means a lot to me, so I will do whatever I can. I understand from because I've read a lot, but I'm finding it difficult to accept. I understand and accept, but I will not be able to publicly support you because grandfather, I understand, I accept, I will fight for you. I have your back, and you have my unconditional support. That's the range of family response to either coming out or being outed. So that's the range of response. Now, to me, I see this as a dimension of a mental health context. And therefore, I have an obligation. So a lot of our position is not that you have to come out, but in case you're outed, you have to deal with the aftermath of that. Or if you have the urgency to come out, to rationally discuss this with you, the options, or to expect what the response might be prepared for that, so that you don't get into an upset that this is not what I expected. And So that's the way, Priyanka, that I would framework this. That. Let me quickly go to what Arkita Talukdar, the Soham Sharma is asking about Indian parents aren't allowed, don't allow this community, and how can we convince our parents for our orientation? That, you know, the many parents now who are part of this movement, if you look at the whole history of the 377 saga itself, starting from the Nas Foundation and Navtej Johar case to the affidavit that the mental health fraternity give in the Supreme Court, and you look at some groups which were parents groups that actually looked at it's to actually garner these groups to use them as advocates for. And this is something that either DeepRanjani as an organization and other communities could sort of work on as an agenda for the future. You know, just to give you an example, parents support group of families and parents of people with intellectual disability. So these are parent support groups. Karnataka Parents Association of Mentally Challenged Citizens is networked in India as a large network called Parivar. It's a network of many parents groups who have children who have intellectual disability. They help and support each other, where finances, how did they set up a long stay home and things like that. So something like that needs to be done there. Sagnik's question, how to deal with the negative criticism and taunts from the people for queer people, and how to make people aware of the spectrum of sexual orientation in the community. Advocacy, more public programs, pride marches, newspaper articles. I remember in the Hollywood blockbuster Ben-Hur, where Judah Ben-Hur, played by Charlton Heston, is becoming more powerful. Masala, played by Stephen Boyd, says, how do you fight an idea? And he says, you fight an idea with another idea. And that's where the power of the media and I think now with a lot of these OTT platforms, and if you look at these new series that's come, you know, Bombay Love, Calcutta Love, Madras Love, like many of these stories are based on are they the best made? That's not my point. But my point is that increasingly this kind of visibility would really give rise to some kind of mainstreaming of this is what I feel that. Srishti has another question. The lack of sufficient research on the LGBTQAI plus community, does it impact the quality of psychological and medical care that they receive compared to the cis counterparts? I think so, Srishti. I think so. Because very little is known about their lived experience, you know, and like I said, my concern particularly is self-harm, it's substance use, its relationship breakdowns and the depression that stems out of that. But a lot of work is being done by these groups that I've spoken about, you know, from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Vinay Chandran, my friend and collaborator. So a lot of this kind of work has been done. Chakrapani from Chennai, many people who work in this area that. And of course, to remind you friends that there is e-certification for this session, and the forms for the feedback are also given on the link. Needless to say, I have a commitment. Yeah, Priyanka, I see your hand. That I have a commitment to DeepRanjani also, that this is just the start of my association and friendship with DeepRanjani. But as Shreyas Talpade said in Om Shanti Om, picture abhi baki hai mere dost. I hope that they will invite me again to continue on the issue of mental health, rights, the LGBTQIA plus community, disability, which I work a lot with. So disability, sexuality, and human rights is perhaps another issue that DeepRanjani could curate, and I would be happy to take part in that. And with that, I hand you over to Priyanka for whatever she has to say, and then finally to Madhu and Priyanka.
Can we take one more question? Can we take one more question so that we can just wrap it up at 4:26 and then we'll go to the validation? Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Sure. So Amrita ma'am has a question, sir. So she's asking that many times while working with the LGBTQ community, they ask if having heightened sexual desire is wrong. And we usually focus on the impact of the psychological vulnerability, need for secure attachment, love and affection, and physiological impact on sexual desire and its variability. What else can we include in the process, sir?
I believe that each person's sexuality and each relation, the sexuality dynamics in each relationship is very unique and personal and private. How many times do you do it? In a month. Hanya, how many times do you do it in a week? In a week? No, yaar, wo mahine mein ek bar. Who knows, yaar? How long does it last? 2 minutes, 7 minutes, 37. Abhe Viagra lete ho kya? Kaise 37 minutes? There are all kinds of myths and misconceptions that abound in. So it is a uniquely personal and individual kind of, and the belief that people in the LGBTQI community have heightened sexuality does not have any basis in. Sexuality is a pan-human experience that now are there people with sexual obsessions or sex addiction? Is there such a condition? I believe that, like I said, if you look at my earlier paradigm of the healthy, happy, safe, and responsible sexuality, that where your well-being and your lifestyle and your relationships are not being compromised by your preoccupation with sexuality or your need for multiple partners, and the risks that come with it. So there is a framework that one can really use to, and I can summarize this framework in a very simple way. I was doing this workshop for 14-year-olds at the height of the HIV pandemic, where this whole business of the ABC paradigm, abstain if you cannot be faithful, if you cannot use condoms, as though it's that simple for young people to, be balanced, that, about how they take decisions in the situation of arousal. So the idea was to do a half-an-hour talk and then Q&A like you're doing now. And at the beginning of the program itself, I'd seen this 14-year-old with bright eyes and an intelligent face, and I knew he was going to be trouble. And lo and behold, when I finished, any questions? Yes. Sir, is it all right to have sex with a woman when she's menstruating? This was at the beginning, I'm talking about like 35 years ago. But then, now if this boy had asked this question to a father or an uncle, लो इसका मोबाइल फोन, पता नहीं क्या बकवास देखते रहता है. I said, look, forget about the sex and the menstruation. Who's the woman? Neighbor, relative, problem? No. Same guy. Sir, if that is not the issue, then that is not the problem, then is it okay? I said, look, we're doing this session because of, this pandemic, safe practices, multiple partners, so. Sir, if that is not the problem, then is it okay? I said, see, conception, contraception, safe period, sometimes errors can take place despite precautions. So, the period, during periods and a day before and after, relatively safe, but we don't know. And, sir, if that is not the problem, then is it all right? I said, listen, the opportunities that boys, men have to explore sexuality and the opportunities that girl and women have. What is your ideology? Is you think of intimacy in the context of a legitimate relationship, someone you know, or is it random? And, so this has, complexities of how our lives play out. And sir, if that is not the problem, then is it okay? Actually, how do I know? Yeah, some people think it is kinky and exciting. Some people think it is yucky and distasteful. We all have our own areas of initiation into our lives of intimacy, and what works for us, what is comfortable, what is aesthetic, what turns us on, what is satisfying. And so that's the framework, Priya, that I would really look at the issue to kind of put a cap on the session, and I'd be happy to come back. And thank you very much for your attention, friends. The very fact that out of 114, 92 have stayed on till the end is a great credit to your interest in this area. And also, I do see that many of my networks to whom I had sent out the link have also joined in, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful to DeepRanjani for very kindly inviting me, and I hand you over to our genial host to close the session.
Sir, your presence, your aura is something that I have actually come across this through your music. I have known you first for your music, and then I have come across your other works and everything. And today, sir, your session was like so engaging and so youthful. So to close it, sir, I would request Amrita ma'am to please do the valedictory, and we sure do want you a lot more with us, sir, for alignment. Take care, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It's a privilege. It's our privilege to have you here today with us. And it's been such an engaging session, and so many participants with us. Thank you to all the participants for being engaged and asking your questions, coming up with your doubts. It's been incredible. And what can be a better way to celebrate World Mental Health Day? Because this is the theme of this year's World Mental Health Day too. Sir, as you mentioned, you have put a very small clause that you would be happy to be engaged with DeepRanjani. It will be an honor for us, sir. And we are also, as an organization, as individual professionals, we are very much interested and engaged in the work of sexuality with special needs individuals and beyond that, and with the LGBTQIA+ group. So we really look forward to, sir, and it's not about whether we will send you an invitation. So it's absolutely going to be our privilege, and I'm sure that we will be doing very meaningful work going ahead, and would be very we would feel blessed to have that opportunity of working with you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all the participants for engaging this. And I suppose World Mental Health Day is not just about a day. It's about every single day of the year. It's not just 10th of October. And it's very important for all of us. What we discussed today is that gray matters. So let's celebrate, let's not celebrate black and white. Let's celebrate gray throughout the year, and let's participate in this whole movement. This is not just a day or an event, it's a movement that all of us are engaged with. Thank you, all of you. Thanks a lot, sir, for being with us, for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.